What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 2. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over each position and break down a couple of my favorite players for this NFL DFS main slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 2. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. I like Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Russell Wilson scored 27 fantasy points in Week 1. He got 5 rush attempts. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 23.4 fantasy points here in Week 2. He's 7,500 DraftKings salary and 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 6.5. So you got a super high scoring game, and the spread on this game is not out of control, within a touchdown, and it's a fantastic matchup. Russell Wilson has DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So I like Russell Wilson here versus the Tennessee Titans. I also like Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, he scored 18 fantasy points in Week 1. He got 4 rush attempts. He's going to be about 11% owned, projected at 22.3 fantasy points here in Week 2. He's 6,700 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 55 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. So you got another super high scoring game here. Close, competitive game, and a great matchup. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, so the sleeper pick, or the low ownership quarterback and the low salary quarterback that I like in Week 2 is Derek Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a pretty good defense overall, and they've been pretty good versus opposing quarterbacks. But Derek Carr scored 28 fantasy points in Week 1. He got 4 rush attempts. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 17.2 fantasy points here in Week 2. And he's only 5,300 DraftKings salary and 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Raiders trailing by 6.5. So Josh Jacobs is out. So this is going to be a passing game script. The Raiders probably going to fall behind in this one. Derek Carr should get a ton of pass attempts in this game. He's got some capable wide receivers. And of course, he's got the stud tight end in Darren Waller. So I like Derek Carr as a low salary, low ownership, high risk, high reward play here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. I like Nick Chubb from the Cleveland Browns playing the Houston Texans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been pretty good so far versus opposing running backs, but Nick Chubb, he scored 23 fantasy points in Week 1 off of 15 rush attempts and 2 pass targets. He's going to be about 11% owned, projected at 18.7 fantasy points here in Week 2. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary and 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and they have the Cleveland Browns favored by 13. So I like that the Browns are favored by 13 in this one. I think Nick Chubb is going to get a ton of rush attempts as the Cleveland Browns get off to an early lead. They're going to run the ball with Nick Chubb. So I like Nick Chubb here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, so a running back that I think is way underpriced here in week 2. He didn't have a good week 1, but it's Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the LA Chargers, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing running backs. Now, Ezekiel Elliott only scored 6 fantasy points off of 11 rush attempts and 2 pass targets, so some people may stay away from him because of that bad week 1. Now, he is going to be about 12% owned, and he's projected at 15.7 fantasy points here in week 2, and he's only 6,200 DraftKings salary and 1,300 more on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 55 points scored in this game, with the Dallas Cowboys trailing by 3. So you got this super high scoring game, and Ezekiel Elliott is just way underpriced. This guy's got monster upside despite not having a good week in week 1. I think that makes him even a better pick here in week 2. He was on the field for 84% of the snaps, so he's going to get his opportunities. He's going to find the end zone. So I like Ezekiel Elliott here versus the LA Chargers. Okay guys, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Matt Cicilline. Matt Cicilline, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay guys, I've got a bunch of mid-range running back plays for you. I'm just going to rattle them off first, and then we'll take a look at the guys that I like most. I like David Montgomery, Damian Harris, Melvin Gordon, and Elijah Mitchell. Let's take a look at David Montgomery from the Chicago Bears playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have the 12th worst defense overall. They give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. David Montgomery scored 22 fantasy points in week 1 off of 16 rush attempts and 1 pass target. He's projected at 16 fantasy points here in week 2, and he's only 6,100 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, with the Bears favored by 2.5. So he's going to be about 10% owned. I think he's a solid mid-range play here. So I like David Montgomery here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if you want to save even more salary, take a look at Damian Harris from the New England Patriots playing the New York Jets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Damian Harris, he scored 16 fantasy points off of 23 rush attempts and 3 pass targets in week 1. He's going to be about 11% owned, projected at 13.1 fantasy points here in week 2, and he's only 5,400 DraftKings salary, only 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43 points scored in this game, with the Patriots favored by 6. So you gotta love the fact that he got 26 touches in week 1. and his salary's low, so I like Damian Harris here versus the New York Jets. Now I also like Melvin Gordon from the Denver Broncos playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the third worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Melvin Gordon, he scored 24 fantasy points off of 11 rush attempts and 3 pass targets in week 1. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 13.8 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $5,900 DraftKings salary, the same price on FanDuel, so I love that price on both sites, but that's a phenomenal FanDuel price, super low salary for a guy that's got 20 plus fantasy point upside. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, with the Broncos favored by 6. So Melvin Gordon's got a lot going for him here in week 2. He's got a great matchup. Could be a running game script if the Broncos get out ahead in front of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had a good week 1. Now, it was only 11 rush attempts and 3 pass targets, but he's going to be a staple of this offense. He's going to get his touches, and he can catch balls out of the backfield. So I like Melvin Gordon here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, another low salary running back. Raheem Mostert was injured. I think he was injured like on the first play of the game last week. I had Raheem Mostert in a bunch of my DFS lineups. Was not a good start to week 1 for me. That's always the worst when you stack a guy in a bunch of your lineups. You watch the game, you're all excited. In the first play of the game, the guy goes out with an injury and he's not coming back in. Such a bummer. But in week 2, we got Elijah Mitchell from the San Francisco 49ers playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a good defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. And Elijah Mitchell, he came in, he did really well. He scored 19 fantasy points off of 19 rush attempts. He's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 12.7 fantasy points here in week 2. And he's only $5,000 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the 49ers favored by 3. So I like Elijah Mitchell here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My wide receiver stud, the wide receiver that I like the most if I'm going to pay up this week, is DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. DK Metcalf scored 16 fantasy points off of 5 pass targets in week 1. He's going to be about 7% owned, and he was on the field for 93% of the snaps. He's projected at 17.6 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $7,600 DraftKings salary, $600 less on FanDuel, so I love that FanDuel price. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 6.5. So you got a high-scoring game, fantastic matchup. This game's going to be within a touchdown, so DK Metcalf should get plenty of targets. I think he's going to have a monster game here in week 2, so I like DK Metcalf here versus the Tennessee Titans.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now this guy did not have a good week 1. He was a week 1 bust.
but I think you got to consider him here in week 2 for a couple of reasons. Take a look at Calvin Ridley from the Atlanta Falcons playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have the 4th worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Calvin Ridley only scored 10 fantasy points off of 8 pass targets in week 1. He was on the field for 85% of the snaps. He's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 17.6 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,500 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game, with the Falcons trailing by 12.5. So I think Calvin Ridley is going to redeem himself here in week 2. It should be a passing game script. I could see him getting double-digit targets. I could see him finding the end zone 2 times in this game. It's a fantastic matchup, so I like Calvin Ridley here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. I also like Keenan Allen from the LA Chargers playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Keenan Allen, he scored 22 fantasy points off of 13 pass targets in week 1. He was on the field for 83% of the snaps. He's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 17.7 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,000 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 55 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. So I want to target these high-scoring games this week, and they're all high-scoring games with great matchups and close competitive games. So I like Keenan Allen here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, now I was all over this guy in week 1, and he had a great week 1, and his ownership is still super low. His price is low. Take a look at Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the Cleveland Browns, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks scored 21 fantasy points off of 7 pass targets in week 1. He was on the field for 78% of the snaps. He's going to be about 1% owned. Only 1% owned? That's way too low. He's projected at 14.1 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 5,900 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Texans trailing by 13. So this is going to be a passing game script. I could see double-digit targets for Brandon Cooks. I think we're going to see more of the same, just like week 1. I think he's going to have a big week 2, and you're getting him at super low ownership, and you're going to save some salary with this pick. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Cleveland Browns. Okay, another sleeper pick for you. Take a look at Nelson Agholor from the New England Patriots playing the New York Jets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Nelson Agholor scored 18 fantasy points off of 7 pass targets in week 1. He was on the field for 85% of the snaps. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 12.1 fantasy points here in week 2. And he's only 4,800 DraftKings salary. He's 1,000 more on FanDuel. So I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43 points scored in this game, with the Patriots favored by 6. So I think this is a good risk to reward play. You're getting him at low ownership, low salary. He had a good week 1, plenty of pass targets. I think he's going to be one of the main weapons for the Patriots. So I like Nelson Agholor here versus the New York Jets. Moving on to the tight end position. I like Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a good defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends. But Darren Waller scored 30 fantasy points off of 19 pass targets in week 1. He was on the field for 94% of the snaps.
He's going to be about 7% owned, projected at 16.8 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary, 600 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Raiders trailing by 6.5. So I like the stack of Derek Carr and Darren Waller because you're going to save salary on Derek Carr. Yes, you got to pay up for Darren Waller, but he had 19 pass targets in week 1. They are force feeding this guy the ball, and now without Josh Jacobs in a game that they should fall behind, they're going to have to pass the ball a ton. Darren Waller, he's going to get double-digit pass targets once again. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now I also like Noah Fant from the Denver Broncos playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Noah Fant scored 12 fantasy points in week 1 off of 8 pass targets. He's going to be about 10% owned. He was on the field for 77% of the snaps, projected at 12.3 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 4,200 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, with the Broncos favored by 6. Fant had a good week 1. I think we see more of the same here in week 2. It's a pretty good matchup. So I like Noah Fant here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I also like Jared Cook from the LA Chargers playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Jared Cook scored 11 fantasy points off of 8 pass targets in week 1. He's going to be about 7% owned, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here in week 2. He's 3,900 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 55 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 3. So you have a fantastic matchup, a high-scoring game, a close, competitive game. So I like Jared Cook here versus the Dallas Cowboys.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.